Hi Marco, hi Alberto.
Hi.
Hi. First question, where are we now?
Well,
That's a good question.
yeah, that's a good question. We just finished recording a video course about data modeling for Power BI. We spent a few days here with all the studio recording.
Good.
Okay.
Good time, yes.
We're spending days here recording this course. It's true, it's been a lot of days. But exactly when did you start thinking about it?
That was, I think,
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Maybe more, but actually we started to plan this 2 years ago when we defined a plan for writing the book. Then we wrote the book, published the book about analyzing data models with Power BI and Power Pivot, which is actually a data modeling book, but the publisher, Microsoft Press, said, don't use data modeling in the title because no one will buy it.
Yeah, they say data modeling was too scary for Power BI users, and of course we titled it data modeling.
Is it scary? It's true.
No, it's not true, but problem is that people is scared about the concept.
People are scared by data modeling, but we taught DAX to so many users, so many Excel and Power BI users, they always struggle with the data model. They always load data, try to start writing complex DAX code. You see tons of code that is really hard to fix and debug. And most of the time it's just a matter of fixing the model, changing it, studying simple stuff. We are not teaching hard topics. There is really nothing complex.
I think data modeling is the basic concepts are relatively easy, and you don't have to be a technician to learn that.
Yeah, basically. I was about to ask you, who is the ideal student for a data modeling class?
Every Power BI user who creates a model importing data is our target, the ideal student of this course. The idea is that these concepts are the usual knowledge of a BI developer, but a BI developer in reality has just a fraction of their skills for data modeling, and it has the skills to do many other things that are not required for a Power BI user. The data modeling part of these skills is very important and actually is the simplest part of the skills of a BI developer. So we tried to translate the concepts that were designed for a BI developer who is used to think in terms of very technical terms to something that was easier to understand for a Power BI user, who usually is a business user, someone who has to deal with numbers all day long, numbers about the business, so he knows exactly how the processes in the company work, but he never had to write a table in Access or SQL Server.
I think that the thing is, think just at Excel. Everybody does analysis of data using just plain Excel, and Excel is easy for everybody. Everybody learns it in quite an easy way because it somewhat resembles paper. You have some worksheets and you write down numbers and then you do math on top of it. So you're not really building a data model. You're working as you typically did it with paper. Now, these days, everybody is crazy about Power BI. We are using Power BI. We are using this new technology. And of course, Power BI is much more powerful than Excel. It gives you a tremendous power, analytical power, but it's no longer based on the paradigm of worksheets. It's tables and relationships. So you have a lot more power, and all these people are coming from Excel to Power BI, and of course they try to use the same technique, the same skills they already had, and that's not enough. They need a bit more. They need to understand how to relay data the correct way, when to compute, how to work with it. A lot of people try to learn, they spend a lot of time learning very complex DAX code, and if they only knew that by changing the model, by fixing something in the shape, in the structure of the data, the DAX code would be so much simpler, they would be able to perform really great analysis just with Power BI. So I think that the perfect attendee is anybody who is starting to use Power BI or is starting to use Power Pivot. They are coming from more an Excel than an IT background, and they want to understand the real power of Power BI.
Alberto, I was thinking about if someone who's used to create databases in SQL Server, for example, or Access, but never used an analytical tool like Power BI or Power Pivot. So basically, who is used to a DBA? Okay,
Yeah.
a DBA who's used to design databases, but for OLTP databases. So
Yeah.
transactional databases, managing sales, purchases, but never had the problem of designing an analytical system. That kind of user
That may be
is actually
interesting too. Yeah.
is a technical user. He's supposed to know how to design a database, but at the same time, he never had to deal with the problems of a reporting tool like Power BI. So in reality, is really, unless you already design a star schema, unless you already have the skills of a BI developer, probably you will get something good out of this course.
Yeah, I still remember the first time I was looking at a star schema. Let's say you need to denormalize all the data, you need to repeat the same value again and again. I was just thinking, no, that's crazy. I will never do that. You're just wasting so much space to create the data
Before
model.
you were still a developer.
I was still a developer.
Yeah.
I was used to work with databases, but I didn't have the mood of thinking of BI developers.
Yeah.
And data models appears everywhere, and when you fix them, everything works so easily. There was a customer a few weeks ago, I was working with him. They had not so much data, the table was not so large, but the report they needed to build required currency conversions, really complex currency conversion. They needed to compute a lot of complex values, and the report was not slow, but it was taking something like 5-6 seconds every time you wanted to refresh the report. And of course, the users were complaining about it, not because it was slow, but it was not interactive. It was not click, 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 and see the numbers. We spent a couple of hours together. At the end, we ended up building a huge snapshot table that pre-computed most of the values, so that it was no longer a matter of computing a number, but only showing it. So whenever they filtered it, the number were already pre-computed and ready to use.
So you pre-computed the data and you denormalized data more.
Yeah, I basically snapshot a huge table. Yeah, it was a few 100 million rows at the end, but it was so much faster than the report they had before. So I think anybody using Power BI, anybody coming from either an Excel background or with not so much knowledge about business intelligence would benefit. We are not going to teach all the details of data modeling. There are tons of books that go in a much higher detail than what we do. But for basic data modeling, for understanding why data modeling is useful, I guess any user would benefit from the course.
Okay, but how do you manage all the updates? You know, we're used to software updates their programs every month. So how do you manage? How do you cope with that? Will this class?
I will tell you a secret. Actually, it's not a secret, but none of the concepts of this course is new. We have been. I learned star schemas too many years ago. I will not say when, but basically we're working with concepts that have been defined in the 90s, in the 80s, in the 90s.
Oh, even earlier than that. The first time they start speaking about BI was in the 60s.
Yeah. So and yes, we can refine a few concepts, but basically the main concepts are always the same. The thing is that we tried to translate the language used to describe these concepts using examples and a language that is compatible with Power BI. But none of the things that we show is actually going to become obsolete in Power BI very soon. I don't see how this will be possible. Even the UI that we use, we use very, very few features. And if we recorded this course maybe 2 years ago, it would be the same.
The very same, yeah.
Yeah, because once we have the basic concepts of tables, relationships, calculated columns, and calculated tables in Power BI, we have everything we need.
Yeah, I think what we did is taking concepts which are really well known. I mean, if you speak with any BI professional, they know everything of what we are explaining. Star schemas, snowflakes, relationships, many-to-many, all these concepts are totally known to BI professionals. What we try to do is to change the perspective. Instead of speaking a technical language, or too deeply technical language, we try to move from the perspective of the user, of the real user of the report, that struggles in computing a number. They don't even think about the data model at the beginning. They say, well, I have this data, I want to compute this value, and I'm failing in doing it. Or the code is really too complex.
And so I have another thing that is, most of the time we try to simplify the data. We have several times we show a business problem and we show several solutions. Now, when we show the solution in DAX, which is usually the first solution that we provide, which is also the more complex one and sometimes also the slowest one, the DAX code that we write is probably going to change in 1 year or two. The solution that we propose after that, the solution that we propose based on a different data model, is not going to change in maybe 5 or 10 years. Because the data model better fits the requirement, the business requirement for the report, which is the real trick, creating a data model that is very close to the business question.
So if I understood fine, if I manage better the data model, my DAX knowledge can be lower? Like, what is the DAX knowledge required to watch this class? Like,
that's a hard question.
That's a hard question because it really depends. Okay, let's say that. You need a minimal knowledge of DAX. You need to know what is a measure, what is a calculated column. You need to know calculator, an iterator, basic stuff for a DAX developer, but the minimal DAX that you need to create even a simple report. Yeah. Okay, so this is the minimum required. Now, over the training, sometimes we use more advanced and sometimes complex DAX. 80% of the times, trying to show, okay, if you do the right data model, you don't need this DAX code. So basically, if you don't understand what we wrote, that's fine, because we offer you an alternative. At the same time, if you know DAX well, you will understand the implications of creating a more complex function, because usually the more complex the DAX code you write, the slower the performance. And so if you realize that behind the complexity there is a computational problem to solve that requires a CPU, that requires consuming performance, you realize in a better way what is the benefit. But actually, you don't need to know DAX at a very deep level in order to create the right data model. We had to use sometimes some complex DAX, but we didn't spend too much time trying to teach DAX because we have a completely different course to do that. And it was not the goal. The goal was to try to simplify the DAX code. So,
besides, I think sometimes we use some complex DAX code during this course. It's not needed to understand everything. One thing which is useful is that all the demos, all the models that we create here are coming from our experience with real customers. Of course, it's not real data, but the data models are examples that we always find with customers. So I think if you don't understand the DAX code that we write in this course, that's a clear indicator that you need to learn a bit more about DAX, because this is the kind of code that we normally find when we author codes. So you can look at the course. You should be able to understand, let's say, 90%, even without a deep knowledge of DAX. And if something is missing, that's a good sign that you need to study that. You need to go deeper and understand. And besides, sometimes I have students looking at what we do with calculated tables, for example, and they typically say, well, I didn't know you could compute such an expression just by using DAX. So it might be useful also to see what you can do. Sometimes with a calculated table that pre-computes values or creates snapshots or does operations like those, you can really achieve good results. And people don't think unless they see what you can do.
Okay, my curiosity is, I mean, you recorded this video course, you're having classes all around the world. Isn't it boring to repeat all the time the same stories? How does it feel?
Yeah. Okay. The real answer, sometimes it could be boring to repeat the same class for the 100th time. Okay, but the reality is different. You never have two classes that are the same. I think never happen, which also means that, believe it or not, when we teach the same content in a class, we end up doing a different course, because you have different students, you have different questions, and you have different phases that gives you the feedback. When I teach in a classroom, now these days, we didn't have the feedback was the black box of the camera.
Yeah.
Which is hard to understand. So you have to rely on the fact that, okay, people can always replay, right? So they can go back and play again. But when you are in a class, you have to understand if the students understood what you're saying. And what is rewarding is when you understand, when you see the light, when you see that they made now I got it. So that is very rewarding for the teacher. And so two courses are never the same.
No, beside when you teach the same course again and again and again, you end up with some sort of autopilot in your mind. So you know what you are saying, you know what you are going to say. I think we spend most of our time trying to understand if the students are understanding. That is where my brain is focusing. So I repeat the same, and that is true. I know what is happening. The demos do not surprise me because I already know when I'm doing something wrong.
Unless there is a new bug in Power BI.
That's always fun, of course. Well, sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's not.
Every month.
But what makes my job interesting is not repeating the same stuff again and again, but engaging with the students and understanding at which level they are understanding what they still need. Sometimes you have the feeling that somebody is really near to do that click, and you need to think of what should I say more to drive you in the right direction. And when that happens, and a lot of times students listen to what you're saying, and then they tell you, well, now that I understood, I'm already thinking at how much work I will have to do on my existing data model to improve it. And that's rewarding because it means that you moved somebody to the next level, and from there, of course, it will be up to him.
This is very funny because you see people that have a mixed feeling. They are happy because they understood, but they are desperate because they realize how many mistakes they did or how many big issues they didn't realize they have, even for the DAX classes
I remember one that at the end of the expanded table part, it was a mastering DAX course. He started writing code on his laptop during the break.
He was fixing his code.
He was fixing a code, and at the end of the fix, he came to me saying, you know what, I just found 5 millions that I lost a few months ago because the code was wrong, and they didn't know where those 5 millions went. It was just a mistake in a piece of code. They fixed it, and he was so happy because now the numbers were matching right.
Well, just the last question. The classical question is, what is your next project?
Oh my God.
Sleeping. Hard to tell. Right now, I guess we are very tired. It was a hard job, that of preparing the whole course, recording and doing these operations. So we just want to relax. And right now, I don't even want to think about the next job. Tomorrow will be a different day. So after some rest, we will start thinking. We are going to write the new version of the Mastering DAX, that we can say, because we need to do that.
Yes, we have to start tomorrow.
I know that. The Definite Guide to DAX, we need to write the new version of the book.
Yeah.
And then traveling.
We have several things in mind, but actually, what's next? Yes, the book is. I think the book is the next.
The book is the
thing.
top priority right now.
We have other things, but yeah, the big project is the book. Yes, that's true.
For sure.
That's true.
Okay, thanks a lot for this time, for this interview, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.